Cassie Ventura is back on the witness stand today in the trial of her former boyfriend, hip-hop mogul Sean Diddy Combs. On Tuesday, the singer, better known as Cassie, spent the day recounting the grotesque and humiliating details of her life with Combs. Prosecutors allege Combs used his fame and fortune to coerce women into abusive sex parties. His lawyers argue that he could be violent, but he never veered into sex trafficking and racketeering. Joining me now to discuss is Lisa Bonner. She's an entertainment attorney and former litigator. Good morning. Thanks so much for being with us, Lisa.
Good morning.
Cassie Ventura was on the stand for over 4 hours. At times, she was weeping. She is also 8 months pregnant. What did you make of her testimony and how compelling it would be to jurors?
Well, her testimony was very powerful. She was the perfect witness in terms of describing the coercion and the battery that she went through. She was very powerful. She was very graphic, and she appeared to be a very sympathetic witness. And, and when you are trying to lay out this case in terms of force and coercion, she is really doing a great job at establishing that she was not a willing participant in these freak-offs, but she was coerced, she was drugged, she was blackmailed into staying. So I think that there was a very powerful testimony, but it's also important to remember that Sean Combs is not on trial for domestic violence or battery. This is a RICO charge with several elements that need to be proved that he used his enterprise, his business, and his employees to further these freak-offs and keeping her under the influence and into a non-consensual relationship.
Right, and the defense making that clear in their opening statements. I'm wondering, how will the defense frame her testimony? And I'm going to add to my question, Lisa, by asking, we often hear this said, well, why did you stay? You were in this relationship for 10 years. Why did you stick around if it was so bad?
Well, that's a very good question. And let me start with the latter part of your question in terms of why do you stay? That is a very common question that is asked for women who stay in these domestic violence relationships. They often stay of fear. But there's something that I want to point out that most people aren't really talking about. There is a very well-known phenomenon that's called Stockholm Syndrome, where the woman, the abused, tends to identify with the abuser, tends to protect the abuser. And we see this oftentimes in the case of child abuse and neglect. And this is the brain's way of coping with the trauma that has been inflicted upon them. And so in this instance, she was very fearful. She had very incriminating activities that were filmed, that Sean was allegedly using, that he said that he was that he would release through blackmail. And, so she stayed for fear of retribution. She stayed also because he was her boyfriend. He was her boss, and he controlled the financial purse string. So there were several elements that would lead to why she would stay. And in terms of how the defense was going to frame this, they're going to say, listen, you were a willing participant. You never said no, but you have to be careful in walking a very thin line in terms of not trying to blame the victim or trigger these emotional memories that might really cause her to break down and then become even a more sympathetic juror. A more sympathetic witness to the jury.
Lisa, what will you be watching for today?
I'm going to be watching for further elements of how this prosecution continues to lay out her case. They've already established the facts of the domestic abuse, but I firmly believe that they are really going to start bringing in and talking more about the people that were involved in this alleged criminal enterprise. The people that were under his employ, his employees, his bodyguards, his chief of staff, and others who really were allegedly, participants and facilitators of these freak-offs and these the prostitution rings and coercing male prostitutes to allegedly cross state lines. So I think that they're going to start to weave in the actual elements of the RICO case today. That is what I am clearly anticipating.
Lisa Bonner, thank you. Lisa is an entertainment attorney and former litigator. Appreciate you being with us this morning.